wants to ask a question themselves. Yeah, otherwise, like, thanks so much for being here and celebrating this crazy, crazy issue with us. It's been a long journey. So yeah, I really appreciate everyone being here. So I'm going to begin with a land acknowledgement. So as Peripheral Review is an organization operated by settlers, we would like to acknowledge and give thanks to the Indigenous communities that we live on, steward, and share knowledge of the lands upon which we operate across 2 provinces. So in Toronto, the Haudenosaunee and Iroquois, specifically the Wendat, the Seneca, the Petun, the Métis, and the Anishinaabe, specifically the Mississaugas of the Credit River. And in Coast Salish territory or Vancouver, the Squamish, the Musqueam, and the Tsleil-Waututh peoples. Some great resources for continued research on the histories, policies, and cultures of the Indigenous people of Canada is the University of British Columbia's online Indigenous Foundations resource, a link which can be found. We're going to post that in the chat. Additionally, we would also like to point to a major issue still plaguing this land. We'd like to ask for your attention in supporting the Wet'suwet'en in their ongoing stance against the Coastal Gas Pipeline. From their website, they say, we need all hands on deck to support the Wet'suwet'en who are defending their unceded territory from Coastal GasLink's liquefied natural gas pipeline. The chiefs wholeheartedly oppose the CGL project, which would turn pristine forests and salmon streams into a fossil fuel corridor. The Wet'suwet'en hereditary chiefs have launched 2 separate legal actions to defend their rights and title from unwanted industrial activity and to hold the governments of Canada and British Columbia accountable to climate commitments for future generations. So we'll post both those links in the chat if you are able to support either through monetary means or donating your time. We would encourage you to research and do so if you have the ability, as we're seeing already the climate change effects of that happen, specifically and particularly here in British Columbia on the Coast Salish lands. So the issue, the Peripheral Review 2020-21 print publication, a collection of published essays, reviews, interviews, and experimental responses published on our website in 2020 and 2021. It also includes print-only artist spreads by Sarah Davidson, Cheyenne Rain-Legrand, Mariana Munoz-Gomez, Audie Murray, Preston Pavlis, and Karen Tam. The issue will also feature a little custom bookmark made by Mariana, as well as a feature essay that comes as a pullout, like little mini zine inside each issue, which is really fantastic, super exciting. Really excited to share it with you when it all comes together. So in the meantime, I'm gonna pop our little web shop website in the chat there. And if you are interested to purchase that today and tomorrow, we have a special coupon code that allows you to get 15% off any of the print issues. So our 2019, 2018 editions as well, by using that coupon code there that's in the chat. Feel free to message us about anything else. So without further ado, we would like to introduce our first presenters, who are going to be the Nicholas Hawk and Eddie Wang of the Toronto Experimental Translation Collective. So combining the formats of seminars, workshops, and performances, the TETC renegotiates relationships within and across languages and media. We use methods of homophonics, transcription, field recording, algorithmic distortion, and cross-disciplinary hybridity to create spaces for heterotopic pedagogy. The texts, recordings, and performances produced document our unlearning of prior assumptions around communication. These activities develop strategies for withdrawal from the instrumentalization of language systems. In addressing the hegemonic power of major languages, TETC brings to the fore language's potential in play and protest. So go ahead if you'd like to say anything, you guys.
Hi, I'm Nick.
Hi, I'm Eddie.
We noticed that there aren't very many collective cults left these days.
We made our own. Please enjoy the material.
Allez, c'est le premier jour point. Regarde. Le moins point, je l'ouvre, virgule, les familles de bandré, virgule, ouvrir les guillemets, c'est bien parce que c'est le premier jour. Point d'interrogation, fermez les guillemets, au moins, virgule, du moins possible, virgule, la réponse c'est virgule, ouvrir les guillemets. Il n'y a qu'une chose pour fermer les guillemets, ouvrir les guillemets, il y a quelque chose pour faire, fermer les guillemets. Open paragraph is the first day period, so you come from far period, try to dinner, comma, tongue is part comma. Open question mark, comes the first day, interrogation mark. Close question mark, like to say, the least possible comma, the answer would be the question mark. There's one thing period, there's one thing also for period, far, period, close question.
Speaking that might resemble speech anything at all about noise, grown bits torn from words is that she hesitates to measure the accuracy, she resorts to making gestures with the mouth and tiny lower lip would lift upwards and sink back to its original place. With a slight tilting of her head backwards, she would gather the strength in her shoulders to remain in this position. It murmurs inside, and murmurs inside is the pain of speech, the pain to say, not to still greater time is the pain not to say, not to say.
Be uttered, they would be from behind the partition, unaccountable in distance. Time to transport the present minute. If words are to be sounded, press the partition in ever slight measure to the other side of the other's signature, the hearing of the other's speech, of the other grasp. Ever since the whiteness, it retains itself white, unsurpassing, absent in hue, absolute, utmost, pure, unattainable, pure. If within the white shadowed shroud, all stains should vanish. All past memories should have been cast, left, without the absolution of power in these words. Dead words, covering, draping, clothing, sheath, shroud, superimpose, overlay, screen, conceal, ambush, disguise, cache, mask, veil, obscure, cloud, shade, eclipse, covert.
Les siennes, I heard the swans, les cygnes dans la pluie, j'écoutais, in the rain I heard. J'ai entendu des paroles vraies, I listened to the spoken true, ou pas vrai, or not true, impossible à dire, not possible to say, là. Des années après, impossible de distinguer la pluie, no more possible to distinguish the rain, there, years after. Si une parole souvent déjà dit, no more, which was heard, vient de dire, va dire, will just say, having just said. Souvenu malentendu, pas certain, heard not at all. La pluie fait revers de son, rain dreamed from sound, de pause, exhalation, de pauses, exhalation, des affirmations, toutes les affirmations, affirmations, all the affirmations, peu à peu, little by little. Impossible de distinguer les paroles, not possible to distinguish the speech, exhaler, affirmer en exhalation, exhale, affirm in exhalation, exclamer en inhalation, exclaim in inhalation, no plus distinguer la pluie de rêve, to distinguish no more the rain from dreams, ou the souffle or from breaths. La langue dedans, la bouche dedans, tongue inside the mouth inside. La langue dedans, la bouche dedans, tongue inside the mouth inside. La gorge.
East, east, east.
Think it is conceiving you. Wait, it is to see you. Think you can see through the dark earth the beginning of a root. The air entering with the water being poured. Dark earth harboring dark. Taking for granted the silence and the dark, the conception seedling. Chase the silence and dark, the conception seedling. Chase you wait you are supposed to. You are wait to wait for the silence to break. To wait for the implanting of some dark silence. Same constant as the field, distant and close at the same time. All around sound, far and near at the same time. You shiver someplace in between one of the dandelion seedling, vague air, shivering just before the entire flower to burst and scatter without designated time, even before its own realization of the act. No premonition, not preparation. All of a sudden without warning, no holding back, no retreat, no second thought forward, backward, there and further inside, further than, to middle, deeper, without measure, deeper than, without means of measure, to core, in another tongue, same word, slight mutation of the same undefinable word, slight mutation of the same undefinable shift slightly to a different sound, the difference, how it discloses here, slight, another word, same, part of the same attitude, deeper, center, without distance, no particular distance from center to periphery, points of matter and face, to begin there, in media res. One by one, sound. Give up the sound. Replace the sound with voice. At a time, stops, returns to rest again at the center of your palm. You turn the seasons by the direction south, north, west, east. You turn the seasons by the direction east, 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 east.
Welcome, creatures, to the hardwood wetlands. These mycelial networks are the brainless body type of stewardship incarnate. Take off your caps, wet your gills, and transfer your genes horizontally. Submit to the selenial flamfolio of wood lovers' paralysis.
Great, thank you so much. That was the TETC. Beautiful. So our next presenter
Sorry, maybe it is easier if you read it because now I can't.
Perfect. So our next presenter is Noor Alé, an independent curator, art historian, and writer. She's the associate curator at the Power Plant in Toronto. Her curatorial practice examines the intersections of contemporary art with geopolitics, decolonization, and social justice in the global South. Alé has contributed to curatorial research, exhibition management, and public programs at the Visual Arts Centre of Clarington, Bowmanville, National Gallery of Canada, Ottawa, Solomon R. Guggenheim Museum in New York, and Art Dubai. She holds an MA in Art History from the Courtauld Institute of Art and a BA in Art History from the University of Guelph. Alongside Claudia Matos, she co-founded Axis, an independent curatorial laboratory dedicated to exhibiting socially engaged contemporary art. Their most recent exhibitions include Extra Colonial Reflections for Action at Sur Gallery in Toronto and Law and Disorder at V-Tape. She was awarded curatorial residencies at the Banff Center for Arts and Creativity and the Shanghai Curators Lab.
Thank you so much for having me. Is it my turn to start?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. So I'm gonna tell you folks a little bit about my contribution to Peripheral Review. I wrote a review on The Objects We Carry by Lorena Salome. So Lorena Salome is an Argentinian Toronto-based artist whose practice is really interested in employing technology to activate commonplace objects and dismantled electronics to create these kinetic works. And this exhibition actually took place at TSV in collaboration with the Public Visualization Lab from February to March 2020, which was, kind of these very initial and very confusing stages of the emergence of COVID-19, where things were a little bit uncertain and we were hearing about it, but we were still not very clear as to what was taking place globally. So in this exhibition, Lorena Salome examined issues relating to global migration, gentrification, and eviction through this installation that invited community participation and a series of collaborations with artists whose practices are engaged with travel. For this engagement, I'm interested in reading two excerpts from this review that I wrote, and of course, opening it up the floor afterwards to asking you folks what carried you personally or professionally during these incredibly challenging times. So I'll just begin by reading the excerpt. When I viewed the objects we carried, I was reminded of a passage in feminist writer Julietta Singh's No Archive Will Restore You. In it, she reflects upon the powerful entanglements between the body, memory, and objects. She says, every object is a narrative that is embedded in me, and how that object came to be mine is an embodied history. For me, as a settler to Canada, the inability of visiting my ancestral homelands is marked by several factors: our current global pandemic, political and social upheavals, warfare, and distances that cannot be bridged without flights. When I emigrated to Mexico City, from Mexico City to Toronto, I took with me address books, obsolete ledgers by today's standards, that are perhaps as dated as the Geographic Atlas of Latin America, dinner bells, and film reels exhibited in the objects we carry. Salome's installation treats personal belongings as a nomadic and ever-shifting archive, a swelling body of disparate objects that knows no geographic boundaries. Objects such as these belong to an emotional economy, since they are ascribed a value weighted by memory, place, and time. As part of her installation, Salome's open call invited individuals to include treasure mementos associated with willful or imposed resettlement. Using repurposed electronics, the artist created mechanical interventions through the installation, where various objects were made to shake, turn, or spin. A tambourine, a pepper shaker, and cocktail glasses were among the objects put into motion. Their movement relied on the cooperation of various processes that were dependent on one another, offering a nod towards the entanglement of global migration. These animated objects reference circuits of diasporic histories that overlap transnationally and intertwine personal narratives of belonging, resilience, and memory. So this concludes my excerpt reading, and of course, in honor of Salome's presentation that was very collaborative and communal. If you're comfortable, I would love to know what carried you, what moved you forward. And if anybody wants to volunteer, that'd be wonderful. And if not, that's something you can hold to yourself. I think we're a shy audience, aren't we? But yeah, this is essentially, I think, a piece that really mediated on movement, on inabilities and abilities, on access, on privilege. And, oh, could I repeat the question? Of course, yeah. So my question was, what moved you, or what carried you forward during these very challenging and uncertain times? Of course, the piece was written during the pandemic. It was the last show that I saw before the pandemic kind of became a global reality, right? And where our lives kind of came to a halt. And for some of us, a lot of things might have changed. We might have relocated, we might have been furloughed, and et cetera. So the question really is about what carried you forward? What kept you afloat? Was it an object, a memory? Yeah.
Thank you for repeating the question. I guess I will help break the shyness, I suppose. But I kind of posed a similar question to myself earlier on in the pandemic when I had to, I guess I was confronted with the dilemma of rewriting a work of mine to sort of reflect the context of the pandemic, because it just sort of, it felt like the context of the initial script would seem tone deaf in a world in which we were imposed with an isolation from external forces, as opposed to self-imposing an isolation for selfish reasons. It was interesting in that I was, being sequestered in my bedroom, trying to sort of design a show, like a theater show that's supposed to happen in my bedroom. It was kind of interesting to see that all of the objects and furnishings in my room kind of were also mementos and memories of people and places from the outside. All of these things had to sort of come from people and places outside, and therefore they were imbued with the characteristics of those peoples and places. And so I think that was kind of, I guess maybe a tangent to what you were talking about, and sort of like, yeah, like these things sort of like crystallized a need to hold out hope for getting to sort of commune again, because that's sort of like how we, I guess like collect our archive of ourselves and others.
That is just so beautifully stated. And that's very much the way I felt through it too, that like these objects had these memories and these histories and kind of like these hopes, right, of being in community again with like friends, whether across the country or, in other continents, right? So I felt very touched by what you said, because I think I had a very similar kind of experience holding out hope for a future. And I think if there's anyone else to chime in, we may have a little bit of time, but I don't want to take up too much space. All right. Well, thank you all so much.
So next we are going to have a little presentation by James Knott and Shalon T. Webber-Heffernan. Shalon is an independent curator, writer, and doctoral candidate in performance studies at York University. She's currently educator in residence at the Blackwood Gallery, and her recent writing appears in Performance Matters, Comparative Media Arts Journal, Canadian Theatre Review, and Theatre Research in Canada. James Knott is an emerging Toronto-based artist, having received a Bachelor of Fine Arts in Integrated Media from OCAD University. Their performance-based practice combines theater, video, and audio art to create immersive and emotionally resonant experiences for the viewer. Currently, their practice looks to house personal narratives and queer experience through poetic retellings, self-mythologizing, and auto-iconographic aestheticism. Explored themes include paradoxical and queer identity, inner dialogue, mental illness, and camp theatrics. Recent projects have placed an emphasis on movement and gesture, queer personae, archetypes of desire, and the commodification of the femme body. Okay.
Hello, I'm Shalon, and I wrote the article that was in Peripheral Review entitled Plenty of Fish, which was the name of James Knott's performance that we worked together on a couple of years ago. And this evening we're going to be revisiting that performance in a way. So we're not going to read any excerpts from the piece, but we are going to dive in a roundabout way. So when Plenty of Fish first came out in Peripheral Review, I have a friend who sort of reads most of my work before I let others see it. And this person said to me that they liked it, but that the one part with the quote, longest, most awkward run-on sentence in all of history needed to go. And in the end, I did not change the sentence, and I felt that it really described the work. And I'm going to read that sentence right now. A vivid scaffolding of imagery has a surrealist effect. A camp meets stream of consciousness, meets écriture féminine, meets Jungian dream theory, meets psychomagic, meets pop culture, aesthetic, unfolds.
Hello?
Hello, James?
Hi.
Hi, James. You know, you seem to have this perpetual sense watching the ships go by, of being out, far out to sea and alone.
My heart's aflutter. I'm standing in the bathtub, crying. Mother, who am I? If he will just come back once and kiss me on the face, his coarse brush hair brush my temple. It's throbbing. Then I can put on my clothes, I guess, and walk the streets.
Okay, so does it matter then? Does it matter that we must inevitably cease completely? All this must go on without us. Do you resent it?
The one way to impose their grief publicly was by embracing the social devaluation of their feelings through parodic, exaggerated, self-mocking, grotesque, explicitly role-playing, stylized performance. Only by fully embracing the stigma itself can one neutralize the sting and make it laughable. If anything, the worms will be thankful for me, even if the angels aren't.
You know, life has always seemed to me like a plant that lives on its rhizome. Its true life is invisible and hidden. That part that appears above ground lasts only a single summer, then it withers away in ephemeral apparition. When we think of the unending growth and decay of life and civilizations, we cannot escape the impression of absolute nullity. Yet, I have never lost a sense of something that lives and endures underneath the eternal flux. What we see is the blossom which passes, but the rhizome remains.
If I make the lashes dark and the eyes more bright and the lips more scarlet, or ask if all be right from mirror after mirror, no vanity is displayed. I'm looking for the face I had before the world was made.
Okay, but daily reality is not rigid, or no more so than the conceptions we have in our heads. The lucid dream taught me to move within a subtle reality.
Hats. All the hats of the world. I don't know how I wear a hat so much. Even when I run, the city can't see my eyes. Under the brim, your hats that you wear when you disappear. How could you see that every day I talk to you?
Yes, but you censor the body and you censor your breath and speech. Write yourself. Your body must be heard. Only then will the immense resources of the unconscious spring forth. It's time to let go of conditioned reflexes, hypnotic systems, erroneous self-concepts.
Mister, all the misters of the world, whose cello are you looking for? How can it escape? City, all the cities of the world, what are you wearing? I live on the 5th floor. of the apartment building. What am I looking for in you? How can I escape you?
View that dreams are merely the imaginary fulfillments of repressed wishes is hopelessly out of date. There are, it's true, dreams which include truths, philosophical pronouncements, illusions, wild fantasies, memories, plans, anticipations, irrational experiences, even telepathic visions, and heavens, Betsy knows what to hide.
Mountain. Heavier the mountains, but that changes over time. Sky. Blue sky. What your eyes can't see. What your eyes can see. Sun. There is only one. Water. Comforting. Flower. So many alike. So many useless. Sky. Red. Red sky. Red is the color. Red is the color I hate. Water flowing. Town. A human creation. What is a human? A creation of God? Is it a human creation? The things I possess are my life and soul. I am a vessel for my heart. Who is this? This is me. Who am I? What am I? I am myself. This, that which is myself. That which is formed is me. This is the me that can be seen, yet it feels as if this is not myself. Strange feeling. I feel as if my body is melting. I can no longer see myself. My shape is fading. I feel the presence of someone who is not me. Who is there? Not here. I know this person. Others. Who are you?
I'm not sure, but don't forget, the lotus grows out of the mud. I still think that the theater is a magical force, a personal and non-transmissible experience that belongs to the whole world. Why are you so anxious?
Quietly waiting for the catastrophe of my personality to seem beautiful again and interesting and modern. The country is gray and brown, brown and white and trees, snows and skies, with laughter always diminishing. Less funny, not just darker, not just gray. It may be the coldest day of the year. What does he think of that? I mean, what do I? And if I do, perhaps I'm myself again.
Thank you.
We're done.
Thank you so much. That was so beautiful. So nice to see things like that come to life a little bit more. Thank you so much, you two. Our next presenter is Chelsea Rozansky. So Chelsea, she, her, is a writer and critic from Toronto, currently based in Montreal. Rozansky is a writer in residence at C Magazine, where she is completing an archival research project questioning notability, collective authorship, and anonymous labor in the production of artistic discourse. In 2020, Rozansky was awarded the Canadian Art Editorial Residency.
Okay, hi. Thank you for having me. I am just going to read from the article that I wrote that was like mostly about life of a Crapphead's residency at the Toronto Biennial of Arts, but I kind of just like, it's about a lot of things and meandered in a lot of different directions. The like excerpt that I'm writing about, like it's a little bit about cancel culture, which I feel like it felt like more of like an urgent issue at the time that I was writing in like 2019. So anyways, okay, I'll just start. Okay. And it's, I'm just reading an excerpt, but while Hussein's biennial joke was about Venice, the controversial biennial that's Toronto emerged in the wake of was last year's Whitney Biennial in New York. All summer, news about the Whitney centered on the then vice chair of the board at the Whitney Museum of Art, Warren B. Canders, who owns Safariland, a private company which manufactured weapons for military police forces and which makes and distributes tear gas used by US Customs and Border Protection on detainees at the US border. In response to Canders' exposure, many artists pulled their work from the biennial and called upon others to do the same. Artists and activists wrote letters pressuring Canders to step down from the board. Activist groups protested on site. Some artists who did not pull their work made explicit artwork addressing Canders, including the forensic architecture work Triple Tracer, a video work which trains AI to track images of Safariland's use of tear gas. Canders' position on the Whitney's board serves as a sobering reminder of the art world's indebtedness to the violence of corporate capitalism. The poor timing of Toronto's first biennial was its marked inauguration in the midst of the Canders controversy at the Whitney and the cast shadow of institutional mistrust. The staff letter implies that I am responsible for the decision to use these products. I am not. That is not an abdication of responsibility, it is an acknowledgement of reality. I am not the problem the authors of this letter seek to solve, Canders finally wrote in response to the staff's letter. I am uncancelable because I am accountable and transparent and I fear nothing, declares Kiki, the performance alias of Kira Bolt during Kiki Gets Cancelled, a faux ousting by way of glitzy public trial and inadvertent parody of the above statement. Kiki, looking very cute in a baby pink morph suit, accessorized with a matching cowboy hat, sequined veil, and leopard print belt, saunters on stage to a canned soundtrack of roaring applause and blows kisses to her imagined already adoring fans. Her executor, a half-naked hot guy, dripping in fringe and wagging a metallic sword, arraigns Kiki for her cancelable offenses. One charge, on July 23rd, 2016, Kiki peed in a foyer for revenge. Another charge, she claims to be a community organizer, but fights with all her roommates. Bolt's performance grapples with Bishop's critique of participatory practices. Artists using social situations to produce dematerialized, anti-market, politically engaged products that carry on the modernist call to blur art and life. Here again, we can imagine the presence of Craphead's ghosts in the room watching us fail. It's a funny joke that Kiki pees on the floor and fights with her roommates, but it also exposes something sad. I make fun of myself because I understand what I stand for, which is a light-skinned, university-educated woman, and in canceling myself, I am also canceling the structural failures of equity and diversity, Bolt tells me in an interview. By being in on the joke, and making fun of her persona, the artist is able to openly work through and explore art's dilemmas and shortcomings. I feel this failure as a Black artist who makes white audiences laugh so hard and whose work is really easy to program into an institution, Bolt says. In her performance, it is the same moments that expose contradictions and nuance, where we witness the enigmatic power of humor to reveal something while concealing it as a joke that Craphead also achieves. On stage, when Kranz accuses Kiki of hypocrisy and the discrepancy between her politically engaged art and her private behavior, she commits to the part. I am no longer an artist that is committed to any kind of social practice, Kiki pleads in her defense. But since this is performance art, this plea is just for show. Compare Kiki's public trial to Candra's apology, which is not a joke. His letter to the Whitney Board of Trustees, written prior to his decision to resign, ends stunningly with the following statement. My involvement with the Whitney also reflects my personal values around diversity, inclusion, access, and equality. This from the guy who profits off weapons used for border security. He goes on. In fact, just last month, I co-organized a series of exhibitions, installations, and public programs at Brown University entitled On Protest, Art, and Activism. I believe that my record speaks for itself. If Bishop is correct in her critique of the SNCC's panorama of socially collaborative work, which uses politically engaged projects to carry on the modernist call to blur art and life, then Kandra's artistic endeavors proves the ultimate spectacle of life blurred behind art. Participatory practice rehumanizes, or at least de-alienates, a society rendered numb and fragmented for the repressive instrumentality of capitalism Bishop describes of participatory art's raison d'etre. But Kandra's cynical adoption of the goals of participatory artwork serve as a reminder of art's inability to break free of capitalism's chokehold. Warren B. Kanders didn't earn his place as vice chair of the board at the Whitney Museum of American Arts through his good taste alone, begins a recent Artforum article calling on artists to pull their work from the biennial. He has also used some of his estimated $700 million fortune to make tax-deductible donations to support exhibitions at the museum, which presumably includes the money put to anti-establishment public programming Kanders boasts about in his letter. It is well known that investing in art is a form of money laundering for the uber rich. But when you're investing in public programming, which, as Bishop points out, has a relatively weak profile in the commercial art world, you clearly have more than just money to hide. Moreover, the Whitney's acceptance of Kandra's dirty money only up until his laundry was so publicly aired out, plus the philanthropic guise that Kandra seeks to hide behind, proves just how extremely morality can be performed as spectacle. When Kandras gets canceled, all that's revealed is that the show just goes on. When audiences laugh at the final charge and Kiki gets canceled, on Halloween in 2014, Kiki painted herself gold and wore a headdress. When asked what she was, she said fabulous. Bolt points to them and says, okay, you're all canceled for laughing at that. A reminder again that laughing is an admission of guilt. It's also a nervous reflex, a telltale of discomfort and confusion. You're able to laugh and you're able to feel complicated, Bolt explains of her performance. This kind of laughter may serve as catharsis from the spectacle of cancel culture, which, as Bolt points out, fuels a kind of panoptic fear of being exposed. It goes without saying that while there are serious offenses like Kanders, the ones Bolt explores in her performance are not. Yet in all instances, cancel culture is too performed a spectacle, hence its typical association with celebrity, as in #MeToo, or in network TV, as in the show is canceled. And now also includes the flashy performance of Kiki gets canceled. Within the spectacle of cancel culture, moral judgments become leveled to aesthetic judgments. Here, cancel culture mirrors and inverts the effect of participatory artwork, wherein, as Bishop argues, aesthetic judgments become leveled to ethical judgments. What serious criticism has arisen in relation to socially collaborative art has been framed in a particular way. The social turn in contemporary arts prompted an ethical turn in art criticism, she writes. Bishop cites a number of art critics who endorse this type of ethical criticism, including the Dutch critic Erika Hagut, who argues in his book Good Intentions, Judging the Art of the Encounter, that we must not shy away from making moral judgments on the art, but weigh the presentation and representation of an artist's good intentions, as if what's at stake in a good intention is its presentation. It's worth noting that representation is a term that comes from visual art. The consideration of representation in art amounts to a question of optics, and it is through this logic that cancel culture arises. If ethics are a matter of representation, then an ethical response is also about optics. A person is canceled like a TV show is canceled. Like you can turn someone off if you don't look. like just looking is enough. While turning themselves into spectacle, both cancel culture and social practice evade their actual goals of building better communities. Once we all get canceled, we can start doing the real work of equity, Bolt says. We'd be able to work together better and love each other better, as opposed to constantly attacking each other or waiting to be canceled. It just seems impossible to get anything done if you're constantly hiding something. How do you build communities in a world that doesn't encourage that? Lam had asked me once. Perhaps Bolt's suggestion offers a place to start. Describing her performance practice, Bolt says, I often joke about my performance as this overfeeding of the ego and then quickly starving the ego to balance this giant persona. Echoes of this narcissistic binge purge cycle ring in Bishop's conclusion to Artificial Hells. In a world where everyone can air their views to everyone, we are faced not with mass empowerment, but with an endless stream of egos leveled to banality, Bishop writes. We consume this endless stream of egos like binge TV. Far from being opposed to spectacle, participation has now entirely merged with it, she writes. Frustrated by art and criticism that reduce arts to a question of ethically good and bad examples, she instead offers that the most interesting art proposes contradictory and novel modes of thinking, a criteria for evaluation other than a moral rubric of good versus bad. The most challenging works of arts do not follow this schema because modes of democracy and arts do not have an intrinsic relationship to modes of democracy and society. This equation is misleading and does not recognize art's ability to generate other, more paradoxical criteria, Bishop writes. Craphead's humor does this. Instead of creating artwork that is didactic or propagandistic or else work that eschews aesthetic contemplation, Life of the Craphead's artwork creates an open door. And despite the reservations, there is something to be said for Craphead's inability to shake comedy. Their artwork is akin to the certain participatory arts Bishop champions in her conclusion, where the relationship between artist and participant is a continual play of mutual tension, recognition, and dependency, more akin to the collectively negotiated dynamic of stand-up comedy. Plus, art can be so stuffy, and biennials can be so disappointing. Doesn't it take the edge off a bit after all our efforts, invest in tensions, to catch a glimpse at ourselves through candid eyes and be like, look at this loser. Okay, that's it. Thank you. Thanks.
So next we have Ella Dawn McGeough and Ella Tetrault. Ella Dawn McGeough grew up near the ocean on the unceded territories of the Kwantien, Katsi, and the Semia-Mahu nations and is presently based in Toronto. They are an artist and doctoral candidate at York University whose practice negotiates sticky sites of affection and infection, influence and inheritance, obligation and commitment, encounter and entanglement, dreaming and waking, inside and outside, you and me, us and we. Alongside Liz Oyrich and Colin Miner, they've co-edited the publishing project Moire.ca since 2012. Ella Tetrault is a Nova Scotia-born artist. She holds an MFA in Public Art and New Artistic Strategies from the Bauhaus University and a BA from the University of Toronto. She's co-founder and co-curator of the Fuller Terrace Lecture Series and founder of Miracle Baby Gallery in Oakwood Village, Toronto. She's currently a PhD candidate in the Department of Visual Art at York University, a guest lecturer at the University of Cologne at the Institute for Art and Art Theory alongside Stephanie Bush. She has exhibited in Canada, the United States, Poland, Greece, the UK, and Germany. She can hold her breath underwater for 2 minutes and 16 seconds.
Thank you. We wanted to, Ella Dawn. I got excited.
That's good. That's actually very indicative of our collaboration. Before we get started, we want to, with talking about our project for Peripheral Review, we want to begin with an exercise that we initiated our dream conversations with the various dreamers that contributed to our project, which we'll get into in a moment. And that exercise is trying to imagine a flower. So we'd invite each of you to imagine a flower and 10 seconds or so to just conjure one up in your head. And then we invite you to share that imagining, a description of the flower in chat. And we'll give about a minute or so for everyone to share their flower in chat. Okay, thank you.
So we thought that we would start just by kind of elaborating on one of the footnotes that we have in the text to kind of elaborate on our kind of sprawling process, I guess, for this over the course of the last year. It started with 2 weeks of dream conversations. And the excerpts in the text are a lot of the dreams, but just to give everyone a sense of the questions we asked our dreamers, which were Charlie Cooper, Rachel Crummy, Tom Cryan, Michael Eddy, Crossley, Kim Newdorf, Alison Potsma, Nicole Schlosser, Latako Delic, and Sonia Westlook, as well as an anonymous few. We asked them if they could describe a recent dream, if they've noticed a change to their dream life over the past year, if they noticed any reoccurring themes, imagery, or places, if their sleep schedule had changed, if they kept a dream journal, if they shared their dreams with others, what made them interested in sharing their dreams with us, and if there was anything that they would like to tell us that we had not asked.
So out of these interviews that we conducted in around March of 2021, we collected around 5 or 6 hours of recorded dialogue. And as Ella described it, that 5 or 6 hours was sort of broken down into about a dozen dreamers. And then that process became a transcription of around 80 pages of unedited text that then became sort of half that after we edited it, until we kept editing it until we arrived at a handful of paragraphs.
And these paragraphs became even more shortened as we started to take out some of the likes and ums and hesitation from the initial audio, which was actually kind of a contentious, or kind of, we had to go back and forth a lot over whether or not we wanted to take those out, because there was a real sweetness to the way that the dreamers that we interviewed kind of recalled their dreams. And Lauren actually helped us a lot, kind of leaving in just enough and taking out some of the likes and ums and uhs. But another thing that we want to share with you today, we have a video that we made with some of the dreamers' audio, and we're excited to share that because it does have some of the kind of recalling in it that we tried to leave in the text, but kind of had to go back and forth with a lot.
And so this sense of contraction of going from hours of recorded audio down to 80 pages, down to paragraphs, down to a series of list of sentences is in stark contrast against our lives that stretched over the last year.
When I had originally pitched this to Peripheral Review, myself, and really was doing it as a way to try to problem solve this kind of desire to still be involved and still write, but my own kind of loneliness and not wanting to be kind of by myself in a room writing, and also my own vivid dreams over over, the COVID year or 2 years. So I had originally pitched it as an interview project, and then things kept on changing quickly, I guess.
So last Christmas, Ella lovingly let me take care of her cat, Ronnie, for about 6 weeks. And as she was about to board the plane, I had a second issue of Cabinet Magazine's Dream special edition. And so I was like, oh, well, you can take this to read on the plane. And she was like, what? I'm doing this project. We'll talk when I get back. And so instead of her trip kept kind of stretching, and we wanted to start that conversation. And so we invited a number of friends to join us on a DM Dream Club, in which we shared texts and bleary voice messages that contained the leftovers of sleep, both in our mouths and in our fingers.
And then kind of with that kind of natural progression, we made a promise to write it together, which I was really excited about, and kind of followed the original kind of idea that I was really looking for company in this kind of writing about the dream world. Yeah.
And company just like through the pandemic, where we were still feeling very isolated in our bedrooms or in our domestic sort of situations in Toronto. So by spring, so fast forward, by summer, we were collating and composing side by side, clandestinely, maskless, which felt very vulnerable, hiding from the heat in darkened seminar rooms that were made empty from the pandemic without students at York University.
And also during that time at York University, we had a really fun outdoor painting day where we kind of collaboratively made this large watercolor together, and then ended up inverting it. So it felt kind of both of us and not of us at all, similar, I think, to the way that at least I experience dreams. And so it was something that we kind of wanted to include as images in the text that we wrote, and small snippets of those kind of sometimes repeating themselves and sometimes floating on their own are the images that ended up in the text.
And both of our backgrounds come from that collaborative painting process, I should mention. And so as summer kind of progressed and pulled us in different directions, we began editing and designing alongside Lauren from Peripheral Review and Brennan Kelly. But our guiding principle throughout this process was to really prioritize the dream descriptions that we had with our dreamers, and to keep them at the center of our thoughts, the center of the writing, and the actual layout of the essay, and not to have them be sort of more like visual content that you could gloss over.
And we had kind of between kind of text conversations back and forth and the dream group, and a lot of kind of conversations between us and then between Lauren and then between our dreamers, we had all these kind of debates about where dreams landed and what they were and how to kind of locate them. And we tried to, those debates became more and more important as we were writing the text. And we have tried to include some of those unfinished sections, I would say, or not even unfinished, but just that one of the beautiful things about writing about dreams is that some of the things don't have a conclusion, like we'll never know, or we can both feel very differently about where they land. And so we looked to include those somehow as well within the text.
Mm-hmm. And even just feel differently as individuals, to feel multiple ways about dreams, that there's no sort of clear capacity for analysis. And then so finally, and well, what's actually still happening is printing, although I think our little insert has been printed, but it's still part of the larger printing process. And that's happened this fall, so sort of coming full circle.
And so we have a short video that we'd like to share. It's kind of functions, I guess, you can hear some of the interviews and also almost as like a trailer for the text itself. So I will share that. I just want to make sure that the sound is being shared as well.
You know how the resorts usually have like the pool area and then there's like the entrance to the beach.
I'm like on stage.
I'm in this house. It's a really big house, an old house.
I was kind of close to the surface. I was kind of looking up.
The kind of vents that's like up on the wall, not on the floor.
I think I was in the kitchen.
A big wave, but like tsunami almost, you know, in size comes, we can see it coming.
And it's known to the people in the house that it's haunted, but no one seems to really care.
She kind of rested her head on my shoulder.
You just know something is true, but you don't know why. And for me, that was like, oh, I know that I'm a plankton. I just knew that to be true.
And there were rats kind of jumping in and out of the vents.
And the darkness was not really, it wasn't really threatening.
And there was like this microphone, and I feel like I'm supposed to like take the microphone, but I'm really scared.
The person who died in the house is leaving, has left messages in a lot of the rooms by arranging different red glass items.
I'm sort of still me, but a different me, I guess.
It's just floating. I felt like I was doing that kind of for hours.
But I had two pet bunnies. There was a black bunny and a white bunny. And they were also going into the vents, but when they went into the vents, they needed help to get out. They needed to be rescued.
So like being in a kind of familiar location, but the lights are really low or it's, you know, obscured, and I'm trying to kind of navigate it with a different sense.
And then she kind of like pushes me out a little bit past the people, and I'm like on stage.
So arranging them in a certain way, and it's a message from this dead person, but nobody seems to like care. They're just like whatever.
And I can see water, but I never realized when the wave hit.
The rats were seemingly fine.
And then finally I like grab the microphone and I start to like play it like a bongo drum, and people start to get excited.
They turn into these kind of gray, nondescript figurines, like ceramic, but they don't really look like anything.
I guess I lost them in a way, but not in a sense that it felt like losing.
And I was singing like, if you wanna go with me to Amsterdam, you gotta get in my car.
I still think about it a lot. Yeah.
And at first, one of the cats I thought was a skunk because it had like skunk coloring, but it turns out it was just a cat. And then there were also dogs in the tree.
That's it for the video.
And yeah, thank you to Lauren and Angel for organizing.
Yes.
Together.
Thank you so much, you guys. So beautiful. I'll just mention it one more time, just in case anyone popped in a little later, but the feature essay that both the Ellas were just presenting on is going to be like a pull-out kind of zine style insert inside the main publication. So it has little snippets of all the audio that we just heard and a little bit more, and it's really beautifully designed by our print designer, Brennan Kelly, and it's going to come in like a little special envelope inside the book, along with a really pretty bookmark as well by Mariana Muniz Gomez. So that's a really exciting addition. Thank you so much for giving us the context on that too. I think that's a really beautiful thing to have with projects like this, of just like the scope. Like, it's easy to see the final project, but it's not always, yeah, the scope of how everything comes together isn't always apparent. So thank you so much. So our next presenters are going to be Lillian O'Brien Davis and Erika DeFreitas, reading on the essay that Lillian wrote about Erika's work, as well as artist Jean Duval. So Lillian O'Brien Davis is a curator and writer currently based in Toronto, Ontario. She's the curator of exhibitions and public programs at Gallery 44 Centre for Contemporary Photography. She has curated projects at Art Museum at the University of Toronto, Susan Hobbs Gallery, the Mackenzie Art Gallery, Support, which I believe there is an opening for tonight in London, Ontario, the School of Art Gallery at the University of Manitoba. Her writing has appeared in Black Flash Magazine, Canadian Art Online, C Magazine, the Brooklyn Rail, Peripheral Review, and Insight Magazine. And Erika DeFreitas' multidisciplinary practice includes performance, photography, video, installation, textiles, drawing, and writing, placing emphasis on gesture, process, the body, documentation, and paranormal phenomena. DeFreitas mines concepts of loss, post-memory, legacy, and objecthood. I will also put the link to Lillian's essay into the chat as well.
Hi, I'm going to be sharing my screen. Hi, Lillian. We haven't had a chance to see each other until now.
Nice to see you.
And give me 1 second, please. So it's not letting me share. Lauren, is there any way that I might be able to share my screen?
Should be able to.
Okay. Well, it's not letting me. But what I can do is just start talking, perhaps. So a few years ago, I had an opportunity to travel to Europe to do some research and to do a residency. Part of that residency was to work in a space in Scotland, and then the research that I was conducting was in Paris. The research in Paris was looking into Jean Duval. Jean Duval, we think, was born in 1820. She was born in Haiti, lived in Paris, was of mixed heritage, and was also known to be Baudelaire's partner. I was quite taken aback by this, this woman who in the 1800s, Paris, mixed race, dating a French philosopher, poet, writer, really struck me as interesting. And I then sort of participated in this intergenerational collaboration with African-American artist Lorraine O'Grady and Scotland's Ghanaian artist Maud Salter. And I say informal collaboration because I've never met either and we've never talked. When I was going to Scotland, I thought perhaps I'd have an opportunity to meet Maud, but then I realized that Maud had passed away 10 years earlier. Maud had started doing a lot of research on Jean, And in 2002, started creating work about Jean. And with my practice, I focus a lot on intuitive knowledge and following Maud's footsteps, I went looking for Jean in Paris. So I was able to locate where it was supposed that she lived. But one really major thing that I wanted to see was this painting by Gustave Courbet called Painter's Studio. And that was done in 1854 to 1855. Now I wish I could share screen because oh, I can now. That was embarrassing how excited I got. So here's Jean Duval. It's said that there aren't any actual photographs of her, but the photo on the right is by Nadar, and that's said to be her. The drawing in the center is by Baudelaire, and the painting on the left is near the end of her life by Manet in 1862. Maud Salter. This is Maud on the left and on the right. And you'll see in the center the work she created based on Jean. And my work, created in 2020, is where I meet with Maud and Jean. I was very interested in how we look at images and look at them as text and can read them as text. So what you will notice in the photographs, there are 8 and they work as diptychs, that there is marginalia included in each image. At one point, Lillian and I had a chat, and I excitedly was sharing the story about who Jean was with Lillian. And so this is my journey of sharing space and learning about Jean through Maud and Jean and through objects. In this image here, you see the photograph that is potentially Jean. Baudelaire wrote a lot of his poetry in dedication to Jean. So his text, Fleur de Mal, really does focus on Jean, and the text of emphasis in this photograph is one called A Hemisphere in a Head of Hair. What I became really quite interested in are these women who were left out of history or art history, who have been marginalized, exoticized, sexualized, racialized, but they exist as these specters. They are still here. They're never quite erased as some would like for us to be. And what I'd like to do is just quickly highlight, this is the painting that I mentioned. I'm not sure if you'll be able to see my mouse, but in the far right-hand corner is, well, actually, I'll show you this guy. This guy here is Baudelaire. And Baudelaire's sitting reading a book. And what you can see very, very faintly in the background, right next to him, is a shadow outline of Jean. Jean and Baudelaire had what was said to be a tumultuous relationship. They had gotten into a fight just after this painting was made. So Baudelaire went to Gustave and said, paint her out of it. He painted her out of it. But what's incredibly beautiful is that she haunts the photo, the painting. She exists, she's present in this really beautiful, subversive way. And this is a collage of photographs of myself standing in front of Jean, acknowledging her presence and sharing space with her. As mentioned, I went to go see where she had lived, and at one point, it was said that Baudelaire had a space for her on the street called Femme sans tête, so headless woman. I was able to find the original engraving on the wall. It just all seemed pretty poetic for it all to be there. These objects that you see are objects that came from Paris. I tend to focus on this idea of psychometry, which is the idea of reading objects, the history of the object or of the person who owned the object. And in a way, I see this as a looking towards and a reading to Jean and Maud. And I'm tracing my lifeline black and going backwards. And then Lillian comes in.
Hi, thank you so much, Erika. I always love hearing you talk about that piece, even though we've talked about it a whole bunch. So thank you everyone for coming tonight, I guess. I'll just give you a little bit of background about the text and read a small excerpt. So what you can see on screen is an image from the Smithsonian magazine. And it was the first image that I saw of what was titled A Sorceress's Kit. And so it was an article published in 2019. And this text that's in Peripheral, it started from this article. And so the Sorceress's Kit was something that had been unearthed in Pompeii, and the reporting on it was sort of minimal. There wasn't too much to say other than there was a series of objects that were found in what would have been a wooden box with hinges, but the wood had obviously been pulverized, so only the hinges remained, but the items, I guess, were brought together in a way that they kind of were understood as being contained together. And I was just like totally enthralled by the mystery, and also just the way that they were presented visually. They really drew me in, and I immediately felt the presence of the women who used these objects, but they were just like somewhere out of sight. Like I just felt them there, because many of the descriptions of the kit were that it was used for rituals in the female world. And I needed to know more. And then around the same time that I had read this article, I had a phone call with Erika, as she mentioned, and she had shared about this body of work called Arrivée avant moi devant moi. And I was so interested, and I made this connection during our conversation, something about feminine communities and gestures of connection. And eventually I landed on the theme of traces as a way to articulate what I was thinking about, that marginalized people, women in particular, who appear to us now only as traces, like the slightly lighter spot on the painting where Jean appears, or the amulets and beads of a kit that refers to an entire community and system of beliefs sifted out of centuries worth of dust. And in my excitement and hubris, I wrote to the researchers in Pompeii, and I just said I was a writer and was hoping to inquire about more information. And they sent me back a very short but polite rejection in Italian that I had to put through Google Translate, saying they already had enough researchers on staff. So I suppose they thought I was trying to like nose in on their work, which I wasn't. But in light of my rejection, I just became even more interested in exploring and thinking about the responsibility of seeking out these traces and somehow bringing them into the light in ways that felt right. And Erika's practice and specifically this particular series really embodies so many gestures of care in relationship to the women that Maud and Jean and so many more who have been set aside by the kind of forward march of the patriarchal narrative building that a lot of the history we know is like built upon. And I just wanted to think about how the gestures in Erika's practice might kind of like link to the discovery of this female world, and how to hold them and treat them with care now that they've returned to us. So I will just go in and read you a little bit of the article. The kit fills me with a sense of loss, an untethering, since what remains is a faint palimpsest on the margins of history, not something easily read. As found in the kit, also found in the kit, was the figure of Harpocrates, the Greek interpretation of the Egyptian god Harpocrute, Horus, the child god, who was usually depicted as a small boy with a finger held to his lips, an Egyptian gesture symbolizing childhood, which the ancient Greeks mistook for a hush for silence. The presence of the god of silence and secrecy, as understood by the Greeks, in the kit seems especially significant since what has been discovered was something private and powerful. Even though they are physically absent, the women are present within these objects, and the agency of the sorceress is wrapped up in the objects that remain. The kit represents their community, power, silence, secrecy, and subversion. What makes this search so challenging is that we must construct their narrative from the fragments in all its tiny, delicate pieces. Jean Duval was erased from Gustave Courbet's painter's studio, at the request of her lover, Charles Baudelaire. In the painting, a careful viewer can just make out where she has been removed. A slight discoloration is the only remaining trace of Duval's presence. Like the fragments of information that Salter and DeFreitas have to work with, only fragmentary knowledge pertaining to the context of the kit still linger. The lack of physical evidence lessens the significance of the discovery, and yet a scientific inquiry also feels inappropriately sterile, since it remains a practice that has long refuted feminine knowledge, often marking it as hysterical. This piece of writing isn't about searching for evidence. Who would believe me anyway? Just as ancient Greek colonizers misinterpreted and appropriated an Egyptian god, these women, the sorceress, Jean Duval, and Maud Salter, are silent. They have been silenced. The traces of these lost women, what we know of Jean Duval, Maud Salter, and what we know of the sorceress, are examples of the continuing erasure of women and their agency from canonical history. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lillian and Erika. Such a pleasure to have, same with Shalon and James, like the artist and the writer kind of together speaking of it. It's really beautiful. It's so exciting. The link to Lillian's piece on Erika's work is in the chat. It's a really, really beautiful, like well-researched, interesting piece. I would really highly recommend you to read it if you have not yet the pleasure. So our final presenter of the evening is Nic Wilson. Nic Wilson, he/they, is an artist and writer who was born in the Maliseet territory, now known as Fredericton, New Brunswick, in 1988. He graduated with a BFA from Mount Allison University, Mi'kmaq Territory, in 2012, and an MFA from the University of Regina, Treaty 4 Territory, in 2019, where he was a Shirk Candidate Fellow. He has shown work across Canada and internationally at Third Space Gallery, Art Mirror, the Ramée Modern Fuel, and at the Venice International Performance Art Week. Their work often engages time, queer lineage, and the distance between art practice and literature. Their writing has appeared in publications such as Black Flash, Headlights Anthology, and Public. He is also the founder and editor of the new publication project Gravitron, a very small press focusing on writing that happens around, about, instead of, or as visual art. I would highly recommend you check Gravitron out as well. Super, super interesting little publication that they're working on. So I'm gonna pop the link to Nic's review.
Hi. Thanks so much, Lauren. I'll say right at the beginning, as Gravitron was brought up, that next week we're launching a Christmas-themed publication by Lillian O'Brien Davis, which is a close reading of Eartha Kitt's performance of Santa Baby. So check that out. It will be around. So first of all, I just wanted to thank Lauren and also Aaron Ostonowicz, who helped edit this piece, and also Julie O, who's here, I think, for making this show, Tunnel Air Mother, and also to Erika DeFreitas, whose work was really influential on my thinking about how we interface with the people and the bodies who made us. While I was working on this piece, I was also doing curatorial research for a show about artists and relationships with their parents. So I've set a timer for 20 minutes and I'm just going to read this piece until the timer goes off. A labyrinth is distinguished from a maze by its lack of dead ends and by its unicircular paths. The traveler is easily disoriented by the winding path, moving against their intuition and sense of direction. In the concentric circles and hairpin turns, the walker moves along a line that bends in on itself. Traditionally, one starts their walk on the outside of the labyrinth, moving circuitously toward and away from the center until they arrive, almost by surprise, at their destination, the center. Similarly, Julie O's work moves with the turns of the labyrinth, but it starts at the center. It takes you along in looping turns towards and away from the specificity of the heating blanket or prescription bottle until this known thing is strange, and known again. The work of the labyrinth is embodied work. It makes an internal world into a physical space. Similarly, so is Navigating O's Tunnel Air Mother, a body of work that confounds, conflates, and takes pleasure in the already messy binaries of mother-daughter, parent-child, caregiver and receiver, intimate and communal, personal and public. Rather than imagining a spectrum, a straight line between fixed positions, the work in this show travels the curves and loops between them. As my mother grows older, I think about the time in my life when she was not growing, the time when, to me, she was just my mother, not growing, not changing. In the solipsism of childhood, it's easy to miss one's parent being human animals. Throughout my teenage years, our family was concerned with the observation of my grandmother. As she grew into dementia, we remained cautiously vigilant of her actions, her eating, her speech, her improvised home improvement projects. There were always things that felt like slips. She put plastic trays in the oven. She called me by my uncle's name. She confidently turned the wrong way down one-way streets she had traveled her entire life. But there were also days when we would find her up a ladder or hurling firewood down her staircase, just as she had done for years. It would have seemed easier if her mind always moved in one direction, but dementia is not like that. It makes the mind slippery, unfixed, for both the person experiencing it and those who care for them. As my mother grows older, the same vigilance has been reignited in my sister and me. There are 2 iterations of the board game Operation on the wall, each one opened up as if for a real surgical intervention. The bodies are fire engine red, and a metal plate winds like a river through each of their centers. These metal pieces make matching meanders, but the particular bends and are smoothed and stretched from one generation to the other. They are labeled contemporary and classic, hinting at the generational meaning of O's exhibition Tunnel Air Mother at the Dunlop Art Gallery in Regina, Saskatchewan. O's audaciously minimal work starts at the center of an object, in its specificity and often its plainness. Several hours before the opening, O mopped the floor of the small suburban gallery. In the video documentation of this action, her pace is not slow, nor is it fast. O takes the pace of work itself, as though it is not a singular event, but rather a link in a chain of habit. This action is not art as life or vice versa, and does not take the heightened posture of performance. The thing I often reflect upon in O's work is the fact that they are just existing, which seems to be one of the most elusive attitudes for an artwork to project. Not too cool or too aspirational, not nonchalant, not overly eager or withholding, just existing. Similarly, the lighting and atmosphere of the gallery is not dim to make the space into a theater for artworks. There is no dramatic spots or pools of light that separate the artwork into individual pieces. Though many of the works are partnered, there is a sense that you are entering a constellation of individuals. Each piece is both connected to another specifically, and each piece is connected to a whole. The gallery has a window with 2 large vertical panes, which O has covered with a reflective film, turning the window into a one-way mirror, and the entire gallery into an observation room. On the opposite wall, a voice prosthesis the size of a quarter is a small, lonely reminder of the third-party forces that knit themselves into our intimate relationships. This small button, used to replace vocal sounds that have been lost after the surgical removal of the vocal notch of the vocal box, is the result of a period of illness that O's mother experienced. And it is displayed at the height that it would have sat in her body while in use, just above the superstitial notch. Though it can come at any age, the medical gaze is seemingly synonymous with aging. This gaze is the difference between looking at someone's eye and looking into their eye. Often, as people grow older, they are pushed further and further from personhood and towards the status of a sack of malfunctioning component parts. Much like O's exploration of games, the body becomes a set of analytical problems, a field of experimentation, or most cruelly, a canvas for virtuosity. The professionalism, bureaucracy, and certification of medicine is obliquely referred to by parenting certificate, which is a record of O's mother completing a course called Parent Effectiveness Training. It is hard for me to think about the medical attention as care. It is hard for me to think about medical attention as care when it exists in the realm of commodity and transaction. Capitalism is so deeply embedded into our lives that it's close to impossible to think of any activity or service existing outside of a profession. I have been the recipient of medical care, medical attention that felt like genuine care, but also the kind that felt like disdain or resentment for employment in general. While I lay mangled in a bed from a lethal car accident, 2 nurses cut off my clothes, brought me warm blankets, and inserted a catheter. One was kind and touched my forehead warmly with gigantic hands. The other rolled his eyes when I lamented the destruction of my favorite shirt as it was hacked off my body and thrown into a trash can. I know there is care in these spaces, but there is also the possibility of cruelty that far outstretches my comparatively humble example. Learning is not a straight line, I yell from the couch as my devoted boyfriend battles our defiant baby dog for a rawhide bone, pushing his back end towards the ground, breathing "sit" over and over again into the scruff of his rapidly expanding frame. Each relationship of care has its own sacred particularities that often get squashed in language. And I wonder which of these particularities are lost in calling Paula my mother and myself her son. Whenever intimate relationships are committed to categories like parent, child, lover, or friend, one inevitably engages in a process of simultaneous abstraction and specification. Each person inevitably inhabits one or more of these roles, and they are quite ubiquitous. But the way each person inhabits these roles and the ways that they layer and intersect can result in infinite amounts of specificity. O also plays on the spectrum between ubiquity and specificity and thinks in the murky depths between the alienation of consumer products, such as a pallet of packing tape, and the intimate offering of a piece, voice box. A gift from my mom. O told me that her mother uses tape as a fix-all. Anything that needs mending, needs fixing, needs care, gets a varying amount of tape. This monumental pile, which seems ready for dispersal from the end cap at Staples or Walmart, becomes a huge chunk of care, gifted from a mother to a daughter. This work makes me aware of the things that live inside other things. When I look at the pill bottles that make up chess, I am looking into the object towards my own pill bottles, back to O's mother's pill bottles, towards my mother's pill bottles. I think about what pulls people and things together and what defines them. What moves them from things that can be the same or different to things that can be the same and different? One of the reasons I'm attracted to O's work is because she engages with the question of intimacy in consumer products and found objects. The mass production and consumption of late capitalism are often convenient targets for simplistic critique. Unchecked expansion of industry and endless production of cheap disposable plastic is bad. It is destructive, suicidal, and oppressive. But O complicates this understanding by acknowledging that these objects also hold emotions, memories, relationships, and even surrogate selves. In the piece Lungs, O presents the internal plastic lining of a burnt out heating pad as a light box. This now defunct object of comfort, which is held against the body, which held her mother's body, is opened up and turned into a papery membrane, streaked with orange and red lines. As I look at this plastic sheet, paired with the single word, lungs, I thought about my grandmother's delicate hands, her translucent skin, her veins. I'm now the same age as my parents were when they had my older sister. I have just become a caregiver to an explosive husky Dachshund puppy. He often vibrates with energy, or perhaps the terror of being newly alive. He jumps and barks. He pulls his claws across my arms, opening up small rivulets of blood that heal into long zipper-like scabs. With him, I have broached the horizon of parenting as far as I ever will, pulling bark and leaves from his mouth, saying yuck repeatedly, before unfurling a bright pink plastic bag and picking up his shit, which still holds the warmth of his growing body. Within Tunnel Air Mother, objects become multivalent. They're simultaneously possessions of a single person, artifacts of a relationship, metaphors for specific people, and also a record of the way those people fit into broader social roles. Through the tumbling and turning of ideas, objects, people, O has presented the messy route one might take in caring. In each turn of the labyrinth, her position changes from child to adult, which brings the concomitant shift in relationships with one's body and the bodies which made that body. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Nick. So interesting too that like it linked up with Lillian and everyone's interconnected, which is amazing. Our world is small. So that's it for the presenters for this evening. I'm just going to quickly plug our last plugs, I guess, of supporting the Wet'suwet'ens work against the Coast Mountain Gas Pipeline. It's a Raven Trust link, as well as our print issue purchase link with the coupon code that will work for tonight and tomorrow, I believe. And yeah, thank you so much again, everyone, for joining us and everyone who presented. So incredible, such a really amazing array of work and practices. And yeah, it's an honor to be able to kind of collect and be a platform that holds all these really nice things. So yeah, feeling very grateful to be able to do that. Yeah, if there's any other questions anyone has, feel free to plug it in the chat. But otherwise, I'll kind of leave it up to anyone to, yeah, slide out as you like. Thanks again for coming. It means a lot.